So you guys both. So you said you're from Texas, Jordan, and Jody, you're from the Winston Salem area.
Close to it. I mean, I grew up kind of in the foothills of North Carolina, so like,
Okay.
an hour west of here.
So what
But
was
yeah.
what was growing up like for both of y'all in your respective areas?
Well, I mean, I've been a North Carolinian my whole life. I've never lived anywhere else. I have nothing to compare it to, really. But I grew up in a really small town. Everybody knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a hairdresser there, so I was really, really good in high school because if I did anything, she would know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was one of those things that it always just kind of felt too small for me. And I got out, I went to college, but at the end of the day, I didn't necessarily want to be in a big city. And I ended up at Wake Forest for law school and loved Winston-Salem. It was a nice little mid-sized city, had everything I needed, and it felt right for me. So I stayed here.
And what part of Texas are you from, Jordan?
Dallas, the
Okay.
suburbs of Dallas, Plano, Richardson area,
Yeah. Okay.
and I went to visit colleges, and I visited Wake Forest. And when I got into Winston Salem, I felt like I'd been born in the wrong state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Despite loving Tex-Mex and alternative and progressive country, and the culture, it was just, it didn't ever feel like it fit right until I made it to North Carolina, and then it was like, yeah, this is where I was supposed to be.
And was she the
So
reason you went to North Carolina?
not initially, but
Okay.
finally.
Yeah. So what
I'm
was
at
the
least the reason he stayed.
what's the
Yeah.
initial reason?
I went to college at Wake Forest initially.
So that's where you guys met. Was at Wake Forest?
Through we played in a bluegrass like old time circle together, and that was made up of Wake Forest people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jody was there because she was a graduate of Wake Forest, and I was there because I was a current law student at the time,
Okay.
and that's where we met.
So it
Yeah.
was indirectly the reason, sort
Oh
of.
yeah,
Yes,
it was
for
definitely
sure.
Wake Forest pressured. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I love that. So, growing up, what were kind of your first musical inspirations, influences, memories? The first things you remember really musically?
My parents loved classic country. I mean, my dad's favorite singer of all time is Patsy Cline.
Okay.
And so I grew up listening to that. And then, of course, 90s country, George Strait. My dad loved George Strait. But so, I mean, that's just sort of what I grew up listening to. I was a huge Dolly fan and Reba McEntire. And, um, the storytelling of country music
Mm-hmm.
is at least back then, maybe not so much current country, but um, I don't know. I just always grew up around it, and it was just something that was part of me, and I never thought of anything else. I got into high school and I listened to some pop music and stuff, and
Yeah.
I always loved Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, but country was my core, country and folk. So, um,
Very nice. And what about you,
And
Jordan?
I loved alt rock when I was a kid growing up,
Mm-hmm.
but mom and me went to. Do you remember CD Warehouse?
Yeah, of
CD
course.
Warehouse,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they were having a clearance sale on Jimmy Buffett albums, and I think we snagged A1A,
Ooh.
Living and Dying in Three Quarters Time, a white sport coat, and a pink crustacean, all like pre 1980 Jimmy Buffett.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this song on there that I absolutely love called Railroad Lady. And it was co written with a guy named Jerry Jeff Walker.
Yep.
And, back when you'd read the liner notes and stuff. And so then I was like, well, I want to see who this guy is. And Jerry Jeff Walker got me into Robert Earl Keen. And I must have been 15. No, I was 16 because I was driving and I heard The Road Goes On Forever and The Party Never Ends for the first time. And it just blew me away that you could write this like 6-minute short story. And
Mm-hmm.
I never really heard anything like that before.
Mm-hmm.
And without a refrain that rhymes or anything. And it was like, this is it for me, man. That was it. I was sold. And that point on, it was all those kind of country adjacent writers from Todd Snyder, to Willis Allen Ramsey and back. You know.
I love this, man, because like it's so funny. It's serendipitous in a way because she's into the '90s country, which, by the way, I'm a huge fan of that,
Yeah.
and you're into the guys that didn't make it into '90s country because they were more wordy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like Jerry Jeff and Robert Earl Keen and Ray Wiley Hubbard and all of those guys that were more wordy, and they were being held out because of the George Straits and the Garth Brooks and all of that. That doesn't make them any less than, right? It's just
Yeah.
they're more wordy, they're more story driven. So I love that. And was that, were you able to? Well, let's put it this way: you had to find Jerry Jeff Walker, and through that, by proxy, Robert Earl Keen, by listening to a trop rock album that was essentially nothing to do with Texas. And yet you're in Texas, and you had to find them through that, right?
I know it is funny. Like it was this roundabout way of
Right.
getting there.
Yeah.
I will say though, I don't know if at that time Jimmy Buffett was. Well, I guess he still had some steel drums, but David Allan Coe was doing that too.
Yeah, yeah.
But it wasn't quite nearly. I mean, he hadn't written Margaritaville yet in those albums that I got. So there was more of a raw folk element to it back then. And that's so funny. You know what? That's also how I discovered Willis Allen Ramsey, because Jimmy Buffett covered Spider John.
Yeah, yep.
Which is on Willis Allen Ramsey's only album, right? And that's how I found him. So I found all these artists through Jim. That's hilarious. That's a great point that I never thought of.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally in Texas finding Texas artists through somebody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would. All of those guys, I would love to chat with, like Ray Wiley and Robert Earl Keen, and of course Jerry Jeff is gone now. But like, shoot, his kid Django is amazing, amazing artist. If you don't know Django Walker, you guys need to look him up. But